All right, I'm back. Let's start talking about YouTube channels that are making some pretty wild income, all without showing their face. If you remember, I posted a video last week. That's the video. If you haven't watched it, go check it out. Why did you not check it out? But that's me explaining this entire series where I look at YouTube channels out in the wild and try to give a very ballpark rough estimation of what their valuation might be worth. So this first channel we're looking at, and I'm using ViewStats, by the way, the Mr. Beast tool, to get all this aggregated data. If you're wondering where that data is coming from, it's coming from viewstats.com. It's a free tool. Check it out. Very cool. And keep in mind, it's probably wrong because it is an estimator, right? It doesn't look at the back end of a business. But let's look at Economics Explained. So Economics Explained is a faceless YouTube channel that I really like. It's something I've been watching for years at this point. And this is Australian dude with a bit of a dry wit about him that talks about a pretty complicated subject, economics, if the title didn't give it away of what he does. So he breaks down a pretty complex topic in a simple and friendly way that's an entertaining, makes you think kind of way. And I've always loved stuff like this. Like, I love Freakonomics. I listen to the Freakonomics podcast, or at least I used to listen to it a lot. So I've always loved like this kind of stuff, like people digging into the research and making it into consumable content for someone like me who's sitting on the couch with a bag of Doritos. So let's look at Economics Explained and at what the ViewStats tool tells us about this channel. All right, so for annual ViewStats on Economics Explained, views 62.65 million views, down from the previous year by about 8.73 million. So that's not great. Subs, 300,000 subscribers, down by 120,000 subscribers in terms of growth, and estimated revenue for the annual is $164,000 to $456,000. So when it comes to that estimated revenue, that seems like a lot in terms of a YouTube channel making, but it's not that crazy of amount in like a grander business sense, because that is not like a terrible amount of money for like to put into growth and to also give yourself a salary and to pay your team a decent livable salary as well. So this isn't like insane amount of money, but like his operations, I imagine, is pretty lean. So he's probably taking a good chunk of that home still, even with that being said. So the overall stats for the business, I just went over the annual year-over-year growth stats, or decline stats in this case. The overall stats, the subscribers, 2.5 million, total views, 299 million, 352 videos, and a publishing schedule of roughly one video every 2 weeks. Now that makes sense with their schedule because these videos are probably pretty intense to actually make, like not from an editing standpoint. He's putting in most of the work on probably on the research standpoint. So that's probably what's taking them the most amount of time and coming up with a script to make it digestible. Because I've watched a lot of his videos. Most of it is just very basic stock photo footage. You know, not knocking that. It works. I enjoy the channel. But that's probably where he's spending most of his time here. And so one video every 2 weeks does make sense. I like seeing that he has over 350 videos. Like, that's really cool. That tells me like this guy has figured out a formula. Like, say I never watched the channel. I wasn't a fan. I was looking at buying this business, 350 videos. That's a lot of videos to have learned a lot of valuable lessons about the YouTube algorithm. And even though he is declining, there is an argument to be made, declining in terms of subscriber growth, there is an argument to be made that part of that is probably because of COVID. Like, more people are getting outside now that it's all over, right? And there's less people glued to their screens than what it was before. Still more, but less than before. So other media that he owns, and this is something I looked into all the YouTube channels we'll be looking at, he actually has some other media, which I think is a very good move. You shouldn't put all of your eggs in a single basket like my SEO friends do with Google, or how a lot of YouTube channels do with YouTube. Now, when you're starting out, you should do that. You need to focus on one channel and get it working. But as you expand, you should go through the pain of starting a new channel and making a new traffic channel work for you. In this case, he has Podcast Economics Explained, which, as far as I can tell, is mostly repurposed content from the actual YouTube channel, which is a smart play. It takes basically no extra time, just a little bit of extra effort to put that out in a podcast format. So that's great. He owns the domain, but the website appears to be leading to nowhere. Maybe it's because I'm in Vietnam. I didn't turn on a VPN, so maybe he's blocking Vietnamese traffic, which does happen. But yeah, at least he owns the domain. Maybe he'll do something there, maybe he won't. He has a Patreon community, which ranges from $3 per month to $500 per month, which he has some great names in there. You can go check it out if you want to see what he calls the $500 per month people. But this is a fantastic way for creators to make more money with the Patreon. And in fact, you don't even need to be a face creator. You can this guy's faceless, but I know another guy, he's making about $30K a month running Facebook ads to his own Patreon page. And that's mostly profit for him because it's a monthly recurring subscription for him, right? So this is a fantastic way to boost your revenue. Now I don't have the exact numbers. I don't think Patreon told me the exact numbers that people follow on or subscribe to this guy's Patreon, but I'm sure it's a decent amount, and that helps you with different monetization. Now I know he's collecting monetization from at least 2 areas. So he has or 3 areas, I should say. He has his Patreon, which we just talked about. That kind of helps you resist against the algorithmic changes of YouTube. If there's a bad few months, his Patreon kind of keeps him stable in that sense. Probably doesn't come nearly as close to his other revenue sources, but it probably is enough to pay most of his staff's wages, if not all of it. I mean, maybe a little bit of profit afterwards. So the other monetization he has is obviously YouTube AdSense. That will most likely be the lion's share of his revenue, I would guess. And then he has sponsorships. So like every now and then his videos gets a sponsorship from a third-party brand, which is also quite common once you get into a higher echelon of YouTube. So he has 3 main monetization strategies, only one of them tied technically to the YouTube platform, but the majority of his business, like maybe his podcast does get quite a bit of downloads. I couldn't find any public data on that. But probably the majority of his traffic is coming from YouTube, which means he's very key man risk via the platform of how his business is being ran. So what is my valuation of Economics Explained? So I already talked a bit about the traffic diversity problem, which does impact your valuation, right? But doesn't make it an unsellable business. He has a bit of traffic diversity with the podcast. Like I would need to see the numbers there. It's worrying to me that his website wasn't working. Again, that might just be a me issue. Maybe the website is up, but that tells me he's not taking the other assets as seriously as his YouTube channel, which makes sense. That's what's paying the bills. But I always think you should go through the pain of having more channels and more assets. And I'll get into a great example of the one that does do this quite well later on. But so in general, is traffic diversity? No, not really. It's probably 99% YouTube. Monetization, yes, he has 3 different monetization pools happening. One, which isn't platform dependent, which is Patreon, which is great. But again, it's probably not making up a ton of money. So let's say this guy's ballparking around $450,000 a year in revenue, according to ViewStat. So that comes out to about $37,500 revenue per month. So they definitely already have a team helping them. So they can afford a team. I know he's talked about having at least 1 or 2 researchers before. I'm assuming he has a few other team members too that's making the process a lot more streamlined for him. So that's a really good sign. The fact that it's faceless means we can eventually either replace his voice with someone else. Like the voice might not even be the owner, to be honest. Maybe it's not the owner at all, but a voiceover artist the owner hires, right? So if that's the case, that's even more fantastic. And that will help selling this business at a premium multiple because the complete team is already in place and you don't need an actual transition to change out that voice and get the audience used to that new voice. So out of that $37,500, let's say 60% of that leaves us with a profit of $22,500 per month. I think 60% is probably pretty close with this because depending on who he hires for his team, you can get a lot of really good talent with offshore work that can replicate the kind of videos he does. And you can also get researchers for the offshore work that can dig through all these white papers for you in a timely manner. So he might be doing that. I think his margin is probably around 60%. If you know, let me know. But it's very likely they're actually making more than this, right? So it's likely they're making 2 to 3 times this amount through sponsorships. So the sponsorship costs can be quite pricey when I've looked at sponsoring other influencers, for example. So it's likely that he's making closer to around $67,000 in profit, give or take like $5,000 to $10,000 either way. So let's stick at $67,000. So that would get us a valuation of right around $2 million. A little bit over $2 million is like the full number I came up with is $2,025,000. So yes, multiple 7-figure YouTube channel right here, primarily only YouTube. So you definitely can make a 7-figure business in my mind on YouTube without exploring any other platform. Would I recommend doing that? No, I wouldn't. I would recommend diversifying as you build up, of course. But you definitely can if you only want to be YouTube and only do YouTube and get a 7-figure exit in your pocket. You absolutely can do it. Economics Explained is a case, an example of someone who has not exited, but probably has a $2 million business. All right, so how would I improve this valuation? How could we give it a little bit of a juice, a little bit of that elf magic, if you will? So one of the things I would do immediately if I bought Economics Explained is put up a website, start collecting emails, and do a weekly newsletter. For his topic, he can do so many fun things in this, and he can even make it a daily newsletter, like the microeconomic newsletter or whatever, because usually he's talking about much more macro trends. So if he went on the micro stuff in a newsletter, that would be a little bit of differentiation that might get his audience to like come in. And he has so much potential here to build a fantastic newsletter, because newsletters really only work in a few different types of niches and spaces. And this is definitely one of them. Economics, absolutely. I think he would crush it if he had a weekly newsletter. And that newsletter, not only does that help him retain traffic off of YouTube, where he actually owns the land versus like a podcast is just renting more land basically on Spotify or Apple. This would allow him to own data. And the most valuable thing in business is owning data. Outside of cash flow, of course, and revenue, like you want to be able to control as much of the process as possible with as little of the middleman as possible. And this would allow him to do it. Not to mention, with his audience size, if he started actively promoting this newsletter, across, say, over 3 to 6 months, I think it would build up to such a good size with his traffic that he would open up massive monetization doors through new newsletter sponsorships. So now he would have 4 different ways of monetizing, and he would have a newsletter that's safe from the YouTube algorithm. Plus, that email newsletter will allow him to do so much crazier promotions. Like, it's one thing to have 2.5 million subscribers on YouTube, but if I made a video to all my subscribers, for my subscribers, like let's say I was doing a special like business giveaway or something crazy, my YouTube channel wouldn't reach all of our subscribers, or less than 5,000 subscribers I think we're at. It would reach just a minuscule portion of them, right? And the same thing goes for him. Now, if he had 2.5 million email subscribers, that is a completely different story. This dude could build a new business in the fintech space overnight with that kind of credibility and that kind of traffic. That would be massive for him. And if you're watching Economics Explained, hit me up. I'll give you some advice. But that is where we're at with Economics Explained. I think if he did that, if he just started even something as simple as a Beehive newsletter to get a bunch of people in, he could probably get Beehive to promote the fact that Economics Explained is in, because they love promoting creators. I think he could build a very simple, very powerful extra step of his business that can open up the doors not to just newsletter sponsorships, but his own digital product creations, maybe his own software, something in the finance space. I think makes total sense with what this guy is doing. So if he just did that and he didn't do it as well as I just said, I think he could easily bring his multiple up, where he could probably sell this business for closer to $2.3 or $2.5 million. And he'd be making more money all the way. And he wouldn't even need to do that much to make that happen. He already has the team, he already has the resources, a lot of it. And because he already cuts out one of the costs, which is the video editor, right? It's just the writer. So I think he could probably easily push this, a little bit over $2 million business to quite easily to $2.5 million just by doing that alone. All right, let's move on to YouTuber number 2 that I enjoy, who is a faceless YouTuber. And this guy, I can't watch him all the time because he is such a downer. Like, everything he does is ultra negative, super like not conspiracy, but just like, hey, we're watching the world burn together kind of guy. He's a big doomer, but he has great editing and great storytelling, fantastic voice. Is this guy named Moonreal. So Moonreal is a social commentator who is also completely faceless, who I imagine is very glad he's faceless, considering how controversial he is with what he talks about. Now, I don't agree with everything he says, but I do find his stuff entertaining, to say the least. So Moonreal, let's look at some of his negative, or not as negative, but the stats of his very divisively negative channel. So annual view stats, views, he has 83.81 million, up by 8 million from the previous year. Subscribers, 352,000, down by 80,000. And estimated revenue between $56,000 to $182,000, up by 22,000 according to ViewStat. Now, this all makes sense. One, when Moonreal is a relatively young channel, it's much younger than Economics Explained. I don't know the exact timeline, but much younger. But the views going up, Moon really took off probably in the last 2 years. So he's still in a very much of an upward trajectory. I don't think he's found like the stability of where the algorithm is going to kind of like try to maintain him basically yet. And the fact that the subscribers down kind of goes back to my point I said earlier about Economics Explained, where that's concerning, but it's not the end of the world. Subscribers don't matter that much at the end of the day anymore. YouTube barely shows them unless they click the bell notification, and even then, not often. And the fact that his revenue is up, obviously fantastic sign in terms of valuation. So his overall stats, he has 1.3 million subscribers, 1,350,000 to be exact. Total views over 186 million, videos 202 videos, and publishing schedule roughly 2 videos per week. Now, I don't know if this guy has a team or not. I hope he does, because otherwise this guy is going to burn himself out. He's been doing consistent videos for a long, long time. I think he's even gone higher than 2 videos per week at certain points in his YouTube trajectory. And that is completely unsustainable in my view, especially with the kind of edits he does. He's doing some pretty hardcore editing throughout his videos to really do that retention editing, keep people engaged, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like what we do with jump cuts, though not nearly as well as let's be honest. Like, Moon is a much better YouTuber than I am. I'm just doing this as a traffic channel to get you to buy a few 7-figure businesses from me. But Moon is actually trying to create super entertaining content, and he does a good job. But again, publishing schedule, in my view, completely unsustainable unless he has a team. So in terms of other media, I'll give Moon some real credit here. He has 2 that are doing relatively well. So he has an email list, his weekly essays that he writes. He uses MailChimp, which, Moon, if you're listening to this, I would recommend, I imagine your list isn't that titanic yet, but I would recommend you move over to MailerLite. I think MailerLite is probably cheaper. As your mailing list grows bigger, MailChimp is gonna charge you a lot more money, unless they changed pricing recently. So that's my free tip for you, Moon, from Marketing Greg here. But the other thing he has that I think is very smart of him, actually, is his school. So if you're not familiar with school.com is a Sam Ovens product, and now also partially acquired by Alex Hormozi, where it basically creates learning communities, and it is a love fest of marketers everywhere right now. There's it seems like every other marketer I know is creating a school of some sort or some type. But it's basically you pay a monthly fee to get into this community, to check out people's videos, essays about something, and to actually become friends with the other students of that course. Now, School, I think, has some actual issues, but overall, it's a decent enough platform to use. And I think Moon's doing a good job here. So he's charging, $5 per month for you to learn how to run basically a faceless YouTube channel like him. And now, this is smart of him because the way his niche in particular does not really lend itself to other types of monetization. Maybe you could sell some merchandise that's really depressing, that has depressing sayings on it or something, but there's not a whole lot of oomph there of what he can do in terms of a natural product extension. But as we all know, the 3 niches that never go will never grow weary, no matter where we are in the world or what epoch we're in, is how to make money, how to have better relationships, and how to get in shape. Those 3 things will always be something that humans want. And he's tapping into one of the broader ones, how to make money, to a pretty broad audience. And my guess is that the majority of his audience wants to know how to make more money. Most people do. So he has 599 members right now, or at least when I checked this. So that's roughly around $3,000 per month, just a little bit underneath that in terms of revenue. My guess is that is pure profit for him. Other than maybe a few hours a week, let's say 2 to 3 hours a week, managing the community, which probably is a overestimation, I would imagine. He's probably pocketing close to 90% margins on that $3,000, if not a little bit more. Okay, so what is my valuation for Moon Real? So for Moon, we'll go with saying he's making $180,000 per year. So that comes out to $15,000 in revenue per month. And we got to keep in mind, he's doing some pretty high skilled editing, right? He's doing that retention editing. So that is not cheap to do if he's not doing it himself. But if he is doing it himself and he wants to sell the channel, he's going to have to factor in those costs. So he doesn't get a free lunch just because he was editing it himself. He will have to pass that on to the buyer, because the buyer will most likely need to hire an editor because they're buying an investment, not a job, right? So Moon, second tip, if you haven't yet, hire an editor and factor it into your cost. But let's say it costs about $30 an hour to make to edit one of these videos to the same kind of standard that he's doing, which that might actually be under what it would really cost, because like I said, it's pretty high-end editing. But each video probably will take about 5 to 8 hours to edit would be my guess. So for our speculation, we'll go on the low end and say maybe 5 hours. and that Moon has streamlined the process well enough that on average, it takes about 5 hours to edit a video. So that brings our editing costs to around $1,200 per month. And when we throw in some research, script writing, thumbnails, all that kind of good stuff, I imagine he's making closer to 40 to 50%, unlike Economics Explained, who I said was probably making closer to 60%, because he is just like, his videos aren't as highly edited as Moon. So like editing is probably his biggest cost for sure. It might be much more than that $1,200, to be honest, depending like with how much he is publishing, but that would be my guess here. So if we add in the school money and we also add in what we think his net profit might be, that comes out to somewhere around $18,000 per month, and probably a little bit higher because he does also have sponsorships. So probably $18,000 with sponsorships per month. And if we took sponsorships out, he's probably closer to like $8,000, like $8,600, maybe just right underneath $9,000 in profit per month, which is fantastic wage. You know, like if he is doing it himself, it's probably more than that, right? Because he doesn't have the editing costs and the research costs. But if he has it fully streamlined, like a true faceless automated YouTube channel, then he's making close to a little bit over 10 grand in profit per month. And while that's not fantastic in terms of growth, like he can't, you know, Moon will struggle to grow on that and pay him a really cool wage. If he's able, I think he's probably a younger guy, so he probably doesn't need to pay himself that much. So he probably has like plenty of like like dry powder around to actually grow his channel in new and interesting ways. But all that being said, I think his valuation would probably be ranging between 30x to 32x. Now, if Moon, the actual voiceover that is on that channel, is not the owner, his multiple will probably be higher than 32x. But at this point, I think Moon, the voiceover is actually Moon. You let me know. So I think his valuation will come out somewhere around $276,000 on the low end to $576,000 on the high end. So a little bit over $500,000. Okay, so what would Greg do if I was looking to buy Moon Real and I wanted to grow this business and make more money? What are some of the creative things I would look at doing? Well, for one, I would immediately go to that school program of his and increase the price. So his price right now is $5 per month to teach people a really valuable skill that they're going to be able to make money from. Like $5 per month is nowhere near close enough to where Moon should be charging. I think he should be charging at least $10 to $15 per month. And even that might be too low. Like really, he might be able to get away with $50 a month. I know school communities, like I haven't seen his content inside of school, so I don't know how like good or thorough it is. But let's say it is, you know, grade A content. He could probably get away with 3 to even 10 times higher charging what he's charging right now. And that's an immediate profit boost. Like almost dramatically, he will like have so much more money to like hire more editors and do a better experience for one, the people in school, but also for his actual YouTube audience that doesn't join. He'll just have a much better production budget, right? And he might even be able to find his next editor out of his school community, which would be kind of cool. So the next part, let's assume that Moon is not editing his videos, that there is an editor that he has employed that is helping him do all of this and to keep it sustainable. Now, if that editor is part of a bigger team or a freelancer, maybe the next thing that Moon can do here is either ask that freelancer, hey, do you have more time? Do you want more clients? And the editor says yes, like, cool, let's work out a deal. And they work out a deal and they sell editing done for you, YouTube, faceless YouTube editing, just in the same style as Moon, using his editor. And that way Moon can get some service money. His editor is much more loyal to him now. If there was a freelancer, we'll be a lot more focused on Moon and Moon's clients that he's bringing, and Moon gets a nice little, you know, relatively passive income boost through that method. Now, if the editor he is using is part of a larger team, like an established agency already, a thing that Moon could do instead, which could even work out better, is simply ask them for a white label solution. Like, hey, I have this community that I'm growing on school, all about like your perfect client. So how about we work out a deal, and he white labels that podcast editing service. Those would be two things I would do. The next thing, which I already talked about, would be creating a newsletter. I think Moon already has one with MailChimp. I would probably move that over to Beehive. I think that is probably going to give him more growth potential, more growth tools. Like they have internal growth tools for creators that I've seen work decently well. So I would experiment with that. Or if you don't move to Beehive, I would definitely take it off MailChimp. I'd probably move it to MailerLite, because last time I did a deep dive, which granted was a while ago, MailerLite was a lot cheaper as you get above that freemium stage where you have to start paying for the newsletter subscribers. But also the deliverability was just better, and MailerLite had a lot better automations if Moon ever wanted to do something more complex. So that's what I would do. I think if you did all of this, it would take him from, on the high end of $600,000, I think it'd bring him closer to around $700,000 to $750,000 just by doing these things that I just mentioned over a period of time. And that's not even to mention like the newsletter sponsorships he can get if he gets a really wild virtuous cycle going here. That opens up a lot more monetization opportunities, just like it would with Economics Explained. Same deal. Though Moon would probably struggle to grow as fast as Economics Explained just because they're more incumbent. And Moon's topic is a little bit less harder to translate into a newsletter, though I think you could still do it. Like political commentary is definitely something you can do. But my guess is like the views he's talking about are his views and that he's like really passionate about. And I think he would struggle to kind of outsource that part. So he may not want to do that right away until he figures, the thought leadership paradox. Like, how do I scale what is technically a thought leadership business or a commentator business when I only have so much of me to give? So that's a problem Moon will have to figure out here. And that goes into actually buying something like Moon. So if Moon is the voiceover artist, then you as the buyer would need to figure out a transition period with Moon. Now, what I would recommend is probably at least 6 months, maybe even 12 months, so you don't pay the full amount of money upfront to Moon when you go and buy this business. Instead, you and him are working together to slowly replace him as a voiceover artist with another person, getting his audience used to that, and Moon working with that new person to train them. And ideally, you should have like 2 or 3 voices when you do this transition, because if you only do one at the transition and then Moon leaves, he gets his last payment of his earnout, what happens if that voiceover artist quits on you? Like, you need to train another one, right? So it's good to have a rotating stable of these voiceover artists just in case one person ends up quitting on you, and that won't leave you in a bad place that way. All right, so there's 2 videos. I have one more video that I'm going to be looking at a couple other channels that I think are cool and interesting. We're using the ViewStat, and then I am going to finish the series with actual YouTube channels we've sold on Empire Flipper. So if you're liking this, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification, go bug Moon and Economics Explained that a magical elf just talked about how to buy their businesses.